The laughter spread across the training yard like wildfire, sharp, disrespectful, and loud enough to echo off the skeel walls, all because of one tattoo on a woman's arm. A tattoo they thought was a joke. A tattoo they assumed she didn't deserve. But 5 minutes later, a Navy SEAL commander, decorated with a chest full of medals and a reputation feared across 3 continents, walked right through the crowd, and when he saw the tattoo on her arm, he froze. Then he stood at attention and saluted her in front of everyone. And suddenly, the laughter died because they finally realized she wasn't someone to mock. She was someone to fear. Welcome back to United War, the channel where real military legends, hidden operations, and untold stories come alive in powerful narrative form. Today's story is about a woman who arrived at a military base as nobody. But within moments, her past, her reputation, and her legacy would silence an entire unit of arrogant recruits. You're about to meet Sergeant Mara Hale, a woman whose tattoo didn't mark rebellion, it marked elite brotherhood. The beginning. The tattoo they laughed at. The sun was beating down on Joint Base Hawthorne, a place infamous for chewing up the weak and breaking the arrogant. Dozens of fresh recruits stood in formation, sweating, nervous, trying to hide their fear behind forced confidence. And walking toward them was a woman, slim, quiet, uniform crisp, sleeves rolled up high. On her forearm was a symbol they recognized, or at least they thought they recognized. A simple black trident. One recruit snorted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look at that. She thinks she's a SEAL." Another added, "Probably got it off Pinterest." The group erupted in laughter. Mara didn't react. She kept walking, silent, her boots hitting the concrete with calm precision. She wasn't here to impress them. She wasn't here to fight them. And she certainly wasn't here to explain anything. The misunderstanding. The training instructor, Staff Sergeant Keller, stepped forward. He wasn't laughing, but he wasn't stopping the jokes either. Keller had seen this countless times. A woman walking into a male-dominated environment always drew unnecessary commentary. He hoped she'd prove herself later. But for now, he allowed the recruits to dig their own graves. Mara stopped at the front of the formation. Keller glanced at her paperwork. Hale. Transfer from Northridge. No notes. No commendations listed. Administrative reassignment. The recruits smirked again. Admin. Makes sense. Yeah, that tattoo must be a sticker. Mara simply folded her hands behind her back. Her silence made them even more confident they were right. But Keller felt something off. An energy. A presence. He couldn't explain it, but he sensed she wasn't ordinary. The commander approaches. Just then, the air shifted. Boots clapped against the concrete, heavy, deliberate, commanding. Every recruit turned. Walking down the center path was a man built like iron, his uniform lined with elite commendations. Commander Jacob Vance, Navy SEAL, leader of Blackwater Unit 7, a man so respected that even generals avoided crossing him. He wasn't supposed to be here today. SEAL commanders didn't just stroll into basic training grounds. Keller straightened instantly. The recruits stiffened. Commander Vance kept walking, his face expressionless, until his eyes landed on Mara Hale. He stopped mid-stride. His posture shifted. A slow recognition spread across his face. Shock, followed by respect, followed by something almost like grief. The recruits were confused. Why was a SEAL commander staring at her? Vance stepped closer, eyes locked on the tattoo. Not laughing, not smiling, studying it like a holy symbol. Scene 3. The salute that ended everything. With the entire base watching, Commander Vance stopped exactly 1 foot in front of Mara. He took a breath, and then he snapped to perfect, rigid attention. Commander Jacob Vance, one of the most feared men in naval special operations, saluted her. The recruit's jaws dropped. Keller's heart nearly burst out of his chest. Mara simply nodded in return, quiet and calm. But the message was clear. The tattoo wasn't a joke.
The training yard had gone silent. So silent you could hear the wind brushing through the flag ropes. Moments ago, the recruits were laughing. Now, every one of them stood frozen, their eyes glued to the woman they had mocked. Mara Hale didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply existed with a quiet strength that made the air heavy. Commander Vance stood before her, still processing the shock of seeing her alive. Keller, the instructor, swallowed hard. Deep echo. That was real? Vance gave a short, humorless laugh. Real enough that half the missions they ran are still classified. Real enough that the Pentagon denies they ever existed. The recruits shifted uncomfortably. Deep Echo wasn't just another special unit. They were whispered about like ghosts. Operatives who went where SEALs couldn't. Operatives who were sent in only when missions were considered suicide. Commander Vance finally turned to the group, his voice sharp and cold. Which one of you thought it was funny to laugh at that tattoo? No one spoke. Not one raised a hand. But he already knew. His gaze locked on a tall recruit with messy blonde hair. Reed. The one who had joked the loudest. Reed's face went white. Vance stepped toward him with slow, controlled footsteps. You mocked something you don't understand. You mocked someone who has lost more teammates than you have years on this earth. Reed stammered. Sir, I didn't know. Exactly, Vance snapped. You didn't know. That's the problem. He pointed at Mara. Every line on her jacket is redacted. Not because she's unqualified, but because she's done things the Navy can't even acknowledge publicly. Reed's lips trembled. The other recruits stared, as if seeing Mara for the first time. Keller, still overwhelmed, turned to Mara. Sergeant Hale, if I may, why are you here? Why transfer to basic training? Mara looked up at the sky for a moment, taking in a slow breath. I needed a reset. Her voice was calm, steady, but there was a weight behind it, a history no one in the yard was ready to hear. Commander Vance's expression softened just slightly. She left Deep Echo 3 years ago, after Operation Wintermark. The recruits listened, wide-eyed. Even Keller leaned forward. Mara's jaw clenched. She said quietly, "That operation is sealed." Vance nodded. "I'm aware. I'm only saying enough so they understand what stands in front of them." He turned to the recruits again. Winter Mark was the mission that took out 2 hostile networks in one night. The mission where Deep Echo lost 2 of their 3 operators. He paused. The implication hit them like a blow. Mara was the 3rd, the only survivor. Reed took an involuntary step back. One of the smaller recruits, Alvarez, quiet, always in the back, raised his hand nervously. "Commander, sir, what does the Black Trident mean?" It was a genuine question. No sarcasm, no arrogance. Just curiosity. Commander Vance nodded approvingly and answered. "The regular SEAL Trident represents mastery of sea, air, and land." He paused. "The Black Trident represents something else entirely." The recruits leaned forward. "It's given to operatives who complete missions with no backup, no extraction guarantee, and no record they ever were deployed. It means you operate in shadows so deep, even your own team can't confirm your survival." Alvarez whispered, "So, she walked alone?" Vance nodded. "More than once." A quiet ripple of awe spread through the recruits. Even Keller felt his chest tighten.
Commander Vance left the training yard with one final nod to Mara, a nod filled with memories, unspoken stories, and respect earned on missions no one would ever hear about. And just like that, the moment passed. Now the recruits were left alone with the woman they mocked, the woman with the Black Trident. And for the first time since her arrival, they weren't laughing, they weren't whispering, they were waiting. Because today, they would train with her. Keller tests the waters. Staff Sergeant Keller gathered the recruits at the obstacle course. High walls, rope climbs, time sprints, balance beams, standard training to break most people by noon. He glanced at Mara. "You're joining them?" She shrugged lightly, as if the physical challenge meant nothing. "I'm here, aren't I?" Keller smirked. "All right then. Recruits, full course, 2 rounds. Clock starts now." The recruits looked at each other, nervous. Their muscles were still shaking from the emotional hit they took earlier. But when Mara stepped forward to the starting line, every single one of them followed, even Reed, whose fear still clung to his face. The whistle blew, and the course that revealed the truth. Mara moved like a shadow, smooth, efficient, silent. Where others grunted, she breathed quietly. Where others struggled, she flowed. She didn't sprint recklessly. She didn't show off. She simply moved like someone who had done harder things under worse conditions with lives on the line. Reed watched her as he ran beside her, trying to match her pace, his chest burning. At the climbing wall, she scaled it in seconds. No hesitation, no wasted motion. Just calculated precision. At the balance beam, she crossed like she was walking on flat ground. At the rope climb, she moved hand over hand with steady rhythm. No swinging, no struggle. Keller's jaw dropped as he checked the timer. She's beating every SEAL candidate who's ever run this course. At the final sprint, Reed tripped, falling hard onto the gravel. The other recruits kept running, except one. Mara stopped, turned back, jogged to him. Reed blinked up at her, embarrassed. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." Her tone wasn't harsh. It wasn't condescending. It was just the tone of someone who refused to leave anyone behind. She offered her hand. Reed took it. Together, they ran the rest of the course. Keller watched silently. He had seen elite soldiers. He had seen ego and pride. But he had rarely seen leadership like this. The aftermath. Recruits finally listened. When the training ended, the recruits collapsed on the ground, panting like dying engines. Mara wasn't even sweating heavily. Keller walked toward the group. "Recruits, front and center." They struggled to their feet, wobbling into formation. Keller pointed at Mara. "What you saw today wasn't luck. It wasn't a show. This is the discipline of someone who's lived through missions most of us can't imagine." The recruits looked at her with new eyes. Respect, curiosity, maybe even awe. Keller asked, "Sergeant Hale, anything you want to say to them?" She studied the group for a moment. Reed, Alvarez, every nervous recruit staring at her. Then she spoke softly. "You think strength is about being the fastest, the strongest, the toughest." She shook her head. "But the real test is whether you stay standing when everything around you is falling apart." They listened, hanging on every word. You don't survive because you're a hero. You survive because someone needs you to. Her voice cracked for only a second, a flash of pain she quickly buried. But Reed saw it and understood that whatever mission she survived, it left scars deeper than anyone would ever see. The night drill that revealed another piece of her past. Just when everyone thought the day was over, Keller blew his whistle. "Night drill at 2200, no excuses." Groans echoed across the base, but when 2200 came, the recruits assembled in the dark, cold wind picking up across the base. The drill was simple. Navigate the woods in teams of 2 and find the extraction point. But simple didn't mean easy. The force was dense. Visibility was low. And fear had a way of turning shadows.
The room stayed frozen long after the SEAL commander finished his salute. The officers who had laughed earlier kept their eyes on the floor, suddenly aware that the woman they mocked was someone far beyond their understanding. Commander Hale's voice broke the silence. "Lieutenant Commander Reyes," he said, using her real rank for the first time in public. "It would be an honor if you'd brief the room." A ripple of shock traveled through everyone present. Lieutenant Commander, not junior officer, not assistant, not recruit. She outranked almost everyone sitting in that room. Mara stepped forward with calm precision, as if she had prepared for this moment her entire life. But inside, her heart was steady for a different reason. She wasn't here to prove herself. She wasn't here for applause. She was here for the mission. She set her file on the table, looked around the room, and said quietly, "You're all wondering why the tattoo matters." The same officers who laughed now leaned forward, listening like their careers depended on it. She pulled up an image on the screen, the same serpent and star symbol from her wrist, but now shown as part of a classified emblem. In the files, this is known as Unit IX, a covert reconnaissance and extraction group formed for operations that require intelligence, stealth, and precision beyond standard protocol. It's built on a dual system command. Hale leads the assault side, I lead the silent side. Several jaws dropped. The unit wasn't just secret, it was mythical, whispered about, never confirmed. Mara continued, "You were briefed on Operation Winter Echo, but what you weren't told is that we have less than 48 hours to prevent a cascade event." She clicked to the next slide. Satellite images of a remote, snow-covered valley, taken at night, with faint heat signatures barely visible. A young Marine captain spoke up nervously. I thought Intel said the region was empty." "It was, until 7 days ago."
She zoomed into one of the heat signatures. It wasn't a structure. It wasn't a vehicle. It was a mobile array, the kind capable of jamming entire communications networks. Someone whispered a curse under their breath. Mara continued. Our adversary thinks we're blind. They think we're divided. They think we're unprepared. She paused. They're wrong. At that moment, the doors opened again. This time, 4 more SEALs entered, each wearing the same serpent and star emblem hidden beneath their sleeves. None of the officers had ever seen them before. None of their names appeared in any directory. One of them nodded towards Mara and said, "Ma'am, the Raven packs are ready." Now the room understood. The tattoo wasn't decoration. It wasn't a joke. It was an identity, a silent code used only by those who had walked through missions no one spoke about, only by those entrusted with operations that could never fail. Commander Hale turned to the briefing table. Gentlemen, we're no longer observing Winter Echo. We're neutralizing it. Mara stepped forward again. This is how it will go. Your teams will run diversion. Mine will infiltrate from the ridge. We'll hit hard, no visibility, no comms, no second chances. Her voice remained steady, almost calm, like she had delivered dozens of impossible briefings before. But the officers could feel it. This was not just a plan. This was a promise. The room shifted from doubt to respect. Then, as if the moment hadn't been dramatic enough, Admiral Kincaid himself walked in. The room immediately jumped to attention. The Admiral walked straight to Mara, stopping inches away. The officers held their breath. Kincaid studied her tattoo for a moment, then raised his hand and delivered a slow, flawless salute. Lieutenant Commander Reyes, it's about time the others saw who you really are. Silence. Then the Admiral added, I'll be joining your operation. Even Commander Hale was taken aback. Admirals didn't join field missions anymore. Sir, Mara said, carefully, this one is dangerous. The Admiral gave her a thin smile. So are you. The room exhaled collectively. Suddenly everything made sense. Why the commander treated her like an equal. Why the intel she carried held weight. Why the laughing officers had no idea the magnitude of their mistake. The Admiral turned to the room. This woman, he pointed openly, has saved more American lives in the last 5 years than all of you combined. When she speaks, you don't laugh, you listen. No one dared move. Then, the Admiral finished. And tomorrow, when the Winter Echo falls, I want it to be her plan that our history books remember. Mara didn't react with pride nor emotion. She simply nodded and said, Then let's get to work. The lights dimmed. The mission began. And the officers who once mocked her tattoo watched in silence, realizing they had laughed at the mark of the most elite female operator in modern military history. And tomorrow, when the snowstorm cleared, the entire world would know her name.